The horror stories that'll bring fear and questions to you are here, multiple days after Halloween. But I worked on it a day before and during Halloween to try and get this up then, so the general spirit of Halloween is still here. While it's easy to see how creepy some Pokemon are just from their looks, it's hard to know right away what might make a Pokemon the weirdest creature with vile habits that you weren't aware of until you scanned it with your Pokedex and saw multiple red flags popping up. Every new generation of Pokemon brings more backstories and elements to Pokemon that you might not have been aware of. But together, we'll be reading through every one of the scariest, creepiest, sometimes just plain weird that there's not even a feeling on how to describe it, new Pokedex entries from the Crown Tundra in order of how frightening they are. These diary notes will bring a chill down your spine. There are some baby Pokemon that have a few tendencies to possibly creep some people out. Now this is a minor creep, just to start things off and prepare us, so it's not too serious, but if you see a random Elekid in your house, you might be in for some trouble. In the Pokemon Shield Dex, it states that Elekid sneaks into people's homes looking for electrical outlets to eat electricity from. That's a little weird, maybe knock first. I mean, it's just like having mice in the house, and that's definitely creepy for a lot of people, but we're also going to see how weird these new Crown Tundra Dex entries are by comparing them and adding on to their old Pokedex entries. Because if we look at its Pokemon Sun entry, it says when it's in a house, electrical outlets serve as its baby bottles and it sucks down electricity. That's a weird image to imagine, but the Crown Tundra added the never used before edition of it sneaking into people's houses. In Sun, it just says when it's in a house. Could have been let in and it's all cute because it's just being fed by its trainer. But no, this wild creature is running into your house and sucking the light from your outlets. It probably makes weird sounds too, but if you managed to run into it by accident and didn't notice it was there, that would be very scarring to see. Which brings us to the next weird baby Pokemon, Smoochum. The Crown Tundra introduced Smoochum with a little bit of nuanced germophobia. In Pokemon Sword, if its face gets even slightly dirty, Smoochum will bathe immediately, but if its body gets dirty, it doesn't seem to care. Just be clean, don't pick and choose. Now that's just semi-weird. I understand the entry because its main focus is its lips, and it will want its face to be cleaner, but those hands better to be washed. Its Pokemon Shield entry, however, is the creepier part where it does add on to some old generation entries, but tones those up even weirder to say, this is a very curious Pokemon. Smoochum decides what it likes and dislikes by touching things with its lips. That's just insanitary. Don't come closer, put this on. Choosing what it likes and dislikes by touching its lips could be seen as a childish thing and is therefore justified and oh so cute, but that's still a creepy kid. Just because they're young doesn't mean other kids don't have boundaries. Elekid's making out with an outlet, Smoochum's trying to feel through life with the touch of its lips. Kindergarten just got weird for the other kids. You know, these Pokemon are going to grow up with some relationship issues in the future. Stepping away from the children, very quickly, we have Triagonal. It's honestly a pretty spooky looking Pokemon on its own with its glaring eyes, but it didn't have that much of a creepy backstory until the Crown Tundra. A lot of its entries from previous generations were about it just capturing its prey with chains of ice, which isn't really that bad when you have to go hunting with chains of ice, and still capturing its prey with chains of ice, which isn't really that bad when you have to go hunting, but in Pokemon Sword, it now adds on to these old entries saying with its icy chains, Triagonal freezes those it encounters. It then takes its victims away to somewhere unknown. That's not just prey now, that's a victim. And to somewhere unknown, there are a lot of spooky variables brought in. Victims could be anyone, somewhere unknown could be anywhere. What are you hiding, Triagonal? What weird secrets are you hiding behind those eyes? Glacier manages to come in next with something that's left a little bit open-ended. Might not be the creepiest at first, and Glacier doesn't look to be the most two-faced Pokemon, but according to its Pokemon Sword entries, it's a belligerent Pokemon. Anything it wants, it takes by force. If you're described as belligerent and you take anything you want by force, that's just a bad sign. You can't trust a Pokemon that's going to hog all the cake just because it wants it to. Really, it's the take by force. You can't just have a discussion with it. That's kind of selfish that you need to always use force though. Maybe Glacier is like a bank that repossesses houses even after you've made payments because anything it wants it will take. Bit scary to have this Pokemon around you if that's the case. The next two Pokemon also share a common trait like the baby Pokemon, as Cradily and Kabutops bring the fossil groups down a dark hole. Cradily starts us off with this new shield entry saying once Cradily catches prey in its tentacles, it digests them whole and absorbs their nutrients. Now that's probably pretty common for most Pokemon, so desensitizing to that description might not make it as potent in the world of Pokemon, but in Pokemon Sword, it adds to that with its tentacles being able to extend over 3 times their usual length to nab distant prey. That's a creepy image on its own, these pink tentacles coming at you to grab you into a one-bite digestion scene. Kabutops has a similar idea here, which really makes me so pleased we're actually bringing all these Pokemon back from extinction, as in Pokemon Sword, the Pokedex states Kabutops slices its prey apart and sucks out the fluids. The discarded body parts become food for other Pokemon. Well, at least it shares, maybe not intentionally, but it does. These 2 fossil Pokemon just have such weird eating habits that you're not going to want to run into either of them. The first ghost pops onto this list higher up than the rest, as it's no surprise that a ghost Pokemon would be even creepier than the previous entries. Spiritomb has a new entry that's similar to its old entries, but marinate with a little more fear. In the previous generations, it was stated that this Pokemon was formed by 108 spirits, but Pokemon Sword now adds that there are apparently some ill-natured spirits in the mix. 108 spirits put together, each with their own self-conflicting thoughts against one another into one Pokemon, just sounds like a giant conversational mess, and nothing would get done. But now there's even some ill-natured spirits in the mix. I don't know how good the flavors will come out of Spiritomb when you start mixing uncomplimentary ones into it with ill-natured feelings, but it just sounds like one very scary internal conflict that's constantly going on in Spiritomb's whole body. Golbat actually swoops in with a new dreaded way of creeping us out. For a Pokemon from Generation 1, you think that there wouldn't be very many things they could add that they haven't already put into the Pokedex. But that's wrong, they did. In Pokemon Sword, it's said that it loves to drink other creatures' blood. Fine, that's weird, but it's a bat, so we can move past that. The part that makes things really weird is that it's said that if it finds others of its kind going hungry, it sometimes shares the blood it's gathered. Like if you had dinner invited over, that's just some situational cringe. How do you bring it up to Golbat to just stop bringing straight blood to the potluck? The really creepy part here is how does it share the blood it gathered? Does it just tell them to come along with it to the source? Or does this bat carry it to them? Because they're going hungry. Golbat has no hands and its feet are not like a gorilla. It can't move thumbs to pack in some blood and bring it over with that fresh seal snap of a Ziploc bag. That means it probably holds it in its mouth and brings it over. That would be a very creepy way to see how it would feed other Pokemon that way. And what if it thinks I'm one of its kind? Don't come near me, put this on. Another new Pokemon makes this list with Galarian Slowking having a rough backstory. Well, over the time of Slowpoke's line of growth, it's gotten a lot more toxic backstories given to us. In Pokemon Sword, it says a combination of toxins and the shock of evolving has increased Shelder's intelligence to the point that Shelder now controls Slowking. The worst part about this is they look to have a pretty decent friendship going on for the longest time together, and then all of a sudden, Slowking is now possessed and brainwashed by the Shelder on its head. The poison type really changed this Pokemon. They say keep your friends close and your enemies closer, but probably don't let them live rent-free in your head. Luckily for this next Pokemon, it has no head that can be lived in, as Regirock is stated to have no brain and no heart. Now that's been a consistent narrative imposed on this Pokemon since Fire Red and Leaf Green, but back then, it was a mystery even to modern scientists now. Pokemon Shield updates that, however, with an entry that fully states cutting-edge technology was used to study the internals of this Pokemon's rock body, but nothing was found, not even a brain or a heart. Back then it was just, oh well, it doesn't look to have any. Now we had scientists go into it to study its internals and now confirm that not a single thing was found. You might be expecting more ghost Pokemon for a scary topic that was also meant for Halloween, but Spectre ends up as the last ghost on this list. That may be a shocker, but when Pokemon Sword says that Spectre's kicks are set to separate the soul from the body, there are a lot of things that can go wrong. What happens there? Where does your soul go? Maybe you get sent to a Spiritomb and now you have to deal with 107 other people. Spectre is also stated in Pokemon Sword to dash through the night and absorb the life force of sleeping creatures. That just makes this a scary Pokemon to encounter, as regardless of what game you're playing, it has something you'll need to watch out for. If there's one type that can compete with ghost types for having the creepiest stories attached to them, then dark types are there ready to clash. The new dark flying Galarian Moltres emerges into the spotlight with some very treacherous abilities. Pokemon Sword says this Pokemon's sinister, flame-like aura will consume the spirit of any creature it hits. Victims become burned out shadows of themselves. That's a lot to go through. It's not actually burning anyone with fire in this, but it's consuming their spirit. No one knows what kind of belligerent things this Pokemon can spring into someone's spirit to consume it. It also turns them into a burned out shadow of themselves. That sounds a lot more emotional than physical, which realistically is probably much worse than just a burn. You can only imagine what it's like looking back at what you could have done and are now just an empty shell like this entry is saying Galarian Moltres might do to someone. The final entry on this list goes to another Generation 1 Pokemon that doesn't form change but has its own creepy attire from its entry that was only introduced in this generation to really fit the topic. Magmar's sword description says Magmar dispatches its prey with fire, but it regrets this habit once it realizes that it had burned its intended prey to a charred crisp. Now Moltres would definitely be higher up in terms of scary things a Pokemon could do to you in the long term, but Magmar regrets so heavily what it does after it burned its intended prey. That's just a whole level of internal conflict. Let's break this down. It chooses a prey because it's its intended prey, it will dispatch fire and char them to a crisp, but once it realizes it did this completely intentional and on purpose thing it's doing, it regrets it and feels bad. What kind of Pokemon is this? Let's just put some emphasis on the word habit here. It regrets this habit. It does this more than once. You have to learn at some point you're gonna feel bad doing this thing that you're consistently doing again and again, where you burn another Pokemon to a crisp. Does Magmar just not remember the regret it feels, strolls on afterwards and goes about its day like it never happened? I think it's pretty creepy to know that this Pokemon all of a sudden has this whole revelation every time it does this, and then it remembers that it regrets it. That's weird, that's not normal. Oh yeah, sure, dispatching flames is not normal either, but this has to be its 12th time doing this if it's a habit it just forgets. I'm sure all of us would feel bad for the Pokemon that it felt bad for, but then also just forgot it felt bad for them and then go do it again to another one. That's like Moltres breaking people's spirits, but Magmar shoots some flames as well.